But to start us off today, I would like to acknowledge how grateful we are to be able to offer this program from where I am in Vancouver today, on the traditional territory of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh people who have been using storytelling and observation as part of their science and their communication since time immemorial. And we are always so grateful to be able to incorporate that in all of what we do in our programs. And so we're really excited to be able to learn all about citizen science and sea turtles this afternoon. And so I'm going to be turning it over to Caitlin in just a moment. Just one final note, again, if you're just joining us, that we'd love to see a hello, maybe where you're joining us from, posted in the chat, as we are just as curious about our audience, as I'm sure you have lots of great questions for Caitlin today. So I'm just going to make sure that I can change over the presentation ability here for Caitlin, but if you want to give a little hello to everyone, then you should have that capability in just a moment.
Sounds good. Great.
Perfect.
All right. Okay, that's awesome. And then I think, all right, so let me just see if I can pop up this share screen. Oh, you might have to coach me through it again. Oh, share content. Here we go. Perfect. Okay, let's pop that up and there we go. Can you guys all see a nice leatherback sea turtle head there? Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me today, Danica, and thanks for those of you who have joined us. As Danica said, my name is Caitlin Birdsall. I actually work for the Marine Mammal Conservation Research Team at OceanWise, and I'm actually based in Prince Rupert, and so acknowledging that I'm talking to you today on the traditional territory of the Tsimshian people who have been stewarding and studying this land since time immemorial as well. Now, a lot of people don't know that our marine mammal research team has two satellite offices, one in Prince Rupert, where myself and a colleague work, up on the north coast of BC. We also have another one over in Victoria. And you may be scratching your head a little bit about how I work for the mammal team, but I'm actually here to tell you about sea turtles today. And sea turtles are sort of our honorary marine mammals at OceanWise. Of course, they are not mammals, they are reptiles, but we do collect data with them, or on them, out of our program, the BC Cetacean Sightings Network. And that's what I want to talk to you today. I am going to preface this that I'm not a turtle expert. I have not spent my life studying exclusively turtles. In fact, most of the time I spend my time learning about and studying whales and dolphins and porpoises. But I think sea turtles are very cool. And what I know a lot about and what I've been doing for OceanWise for over 10 years is the citizen science aspect. And so I wanted to talk about one of our more rare species, a species that maybe a lot of you don't even know that we have on our coast here, that we learn about through citizen science, which is the leatherback sea turtles. So that's what we're going to talk about today, citizen science and sea turtles and how they meld together through our program at OceanWise called the Sightings Network. And I am happy to take questions anytime, so just pop them into the chat. And if there's anything that's not clear, let me know. And Danica, feel free to give me a poke if anything comes up that I missed. So we're talking about citizen science today, and I thought maybe we should define what that is, because maybe it's a term you haven't heard before. And if we look at a very, very broad definition, essentially citizen science is scientific work or data collection undertaken by members of the general public. So people like you, anyone can participate as a citizen scientist. And it's often done in collaboration or under the direction of professional scientists or scientific institutions like Oceanwise. And I love the idea of citizen science because I love the idea that anybody can be part of the scientific process. And I think we all have a lot of observations or have the ability to make a lot of observations that can really, really help scientists. So of course, scientists are important, but I think that there's a lot of room for people to get involved in science, even if you're not a scientist. So here at Oceanwise, we've been running a citizen science project for 20 years, and it's actually one of the largest, most successful citizen science projects in Canada. It's called the BC Cetacean Sightings Network. Cetacean is going to be a bit of a confusing word today because cetacean is just the order that includes whales, dolphins, and porpoises. We added sea turtles in there a few years ago as well. So again, they're not cetaceans, but we do collect data on them in the same way that we collect data on our whales and dolphins out on the coast. And what the Cetacean Sightings Network does is it recruits this network of observers up and down the coast of BC, and anyone can participate. So to date, we have over close to 7,000 people who participate in sending their sightings into the BC Cetacean Sightings Network. This is an opportunistic network, so you don't have to sign up in advance. If you see something, you can report it. Now, normally what we're asking people to tell us about, of course, is those cetaceans, those whales and dolphins and porpoises. But about 10, 15 years ago, we added sea turtles into the mix. And this has been a great way to collect data. We have over 120,000 sightings now in our Sightings Network database of these different species, cetaceans and sea turtles. This is a big, big, big chunk of data that's really helpful. And not only do we use it at Oceanwise to better understand when and where different species are being seen, but we also share that data out as well. Yeah, 120,000 sightings. It's pretty incredible. That's a big amount of data, and it's really thanks to people who are working, living, and playing on the water. So the Sightings Network, I think, is great for a couple different things. One, we can collect a lot of data on these animals, but the other thing that's really useful is that scientists just cannot be on the water all the time. It's not possible both logistically or financially. It's really expensive and difficult to do big coastwide surveys for whales or for sea turtles, especially on the coast of BC. So the idea here is that the more eyes, the better. And this is important when we're trying to learn about species that we might be familiar with, like killer whales. It can tell us, what time of year they're using different areas, which pods are in different spots. But I think it's really powerful as well for learning about really rare species. And sea turtles fall into that because they are so rare on our coast. I could go out and do a big, long survey, and the chance of me seeing one is really, really small. But if we have thousands of sets of eyes on the coast looking for them and telling us when they see them, our chance to learn about when and where they're spending time really increases exponentially. So this is, I think, one of the places that citizen science really shines, is being able to really cover a bigger area over a broader amount of time. So I want to talk about that idea of learning about rare species. And one of the rarest, and again, like I said, one of the coolest species I think we get on the coast of BC is this guy. This is our leatherback sea turtle. Now, leatherbacks are so unusual on our coast that most people don't know that we get them, and not by accident, on the coast of British Columbia. In fact, most observers who report seeing a leatherback sea turtle are usually flabbergasted. I have a great quote here from one of our observers who basically said when she reported it, "I could not figure out what I was looking at. When I saw the head, I thought it was an alligator, but I knew that that couldn't be right." So I realized afterwards it was a sea turtle, and I had no idea that they existed in BC. And this is really common. Most people who are lucky enough to spot one, despite they might have been fishermen for 40, 50 years, usually had no idea that they were out there. I once did a presentation and a man came up to me afterwards and said, "You just answered my lifelong question. I saw something 40 years ago off Haida Gwaii, and I thought it was a sea monster. And I realize now that it was a sea turtle. So that was really cool. But even it goes to show these really experienced mariners don't know that we get sea turtles. Yeah, so very, very cool. Now, if you were out on the water, though, like a lot of these people, you might see something and not realize it's a turtle because you're not thinking, okay, there might be turtles up here. So I want to give you a little hint on what you might see if you were a citizen scientist looking at a, a leatherback sea turtle. So most of the time when we see leatherbacks, we don't see all of them. Mostly all we're going to get to see is their head and a little bit of their carapace, which is sort of what we call the shell for a leatherback sea turtle. Now, they're dark in color, which makes them tricky to spot, especially when we have dark waters around here. And they kind of have these little white freckles a little bit on a lot of the parts of their body. Now, one thing that's really unique about leatherback sea turtles is this pink or orange spot you're seeing on the top of their head here. This is called the pineal spot. And what's really interesting about this is it's sort of like a leatherback sea turtle's fingerprint. Each turtle has a slightly different looking pineal spot. In this one, this picture, it's got a huge one, which is actually quite unusual. Usually they're a little bit smaller, but scientists can actually tell different individual turtles apart, especially in an area where they see a lot of them based on what that spot looks like. Now, the other thing that's really unusual about leatherback sea turtles is that that carapace is not like a hard shell that we normally think of when we think of sea turtles. Maybe some of you have seen sea turtles before, like a green sea turtle in Hawaii or olive ridley sea turtles down in Central America, and you would know they have that hard shell. Leatherback sea turtles have this leathery carapace, and it's got these long ridges that run down it, almost like a wooden dinghy flipped upside down with sort of these long ridges all the way down it. And that back really does look like leather. And here's a bit of a better look at that. So you can see on the left-hand side of the screen there is a more typical green sea turtle with this hard shell with scutes, whereas this leatherback has this sort of leathery covering over a bunch of kind of scutes underneath and these long ridges. And it's also very teardrop shaped. You can see it really comes to a point at the very back there. So those are some tips that you would look for if you were trying to figure out if what you were seeing was actually a leatherback sea turtle. Now, in order to get you really excited about leatherback sea turtles, I also thought I should share some of the things that make them pretty extraordinary in the world of sea turtles, because they are very different, like I said, than the sea turtles we might be a little bit more familiar with. One thing that's very cool about leatherback sea turtles is that they are ancient. They're the sole survivor of a family called the Dermochiliidae. And the leatherbacks, our ancestors of the leatherbacks, have been around in the form that they basically have right now. They've basically not changed very much for over 65 million years ago. In fact, some scientists estimate that more like 90 million years ago. They were around during the Jurassic period, which means Tyrannosaurus rex and leatherback sea turtles were on the earth at the same time. Dinosaurs didn't make it, but the leatherbacks did. And so they are a very ancient type of animal, and there really hasn't been a huge amount of change to their basic sort of form and structure since that time. The other thing is that they are humongous. And now that would be something you would probably notice about them if you ever were lucky enough to spot one. Some of the largest individuals can be over 3 meters or 900 kilograms. Now in the Pacific, on our side, they're usually a little bit smaller, about 2 meters or over 650 kilos, but that still means they're about the size of a smart car. So these are very, very, very big turtles. You can see that compared to this full-grown man, that they are really these enormous turtles. And we're going to talk about why that's important as well when they visit BC, being so big, in just a moment as well. Another very kind of cool leatherback 101 fact is that they are excellent divers. In fact, scientists have clocked them going 1,200 meters in depth. That's 20 hockey rinks down into the water column, and they can hold their breath for over an hour. That makes them super of the sea turtles, really, really good divers. And not only are they great at diving, but they are also basically marathon swimmers as well. In fact, the furthest movement of a tagged leatherback sea turtle was over 20,000 kilometers. That's like you and I walking across Canada from Victoria to Halifax about 4 to 5 times. So these huge distances they're traveling. And that turtle did that in just over 600 days. Now, turtles can only swim forward. They actually can't swim backwards. So it was moving. And while they are great marathon swimmers and not particularly speedy, kind of top speed for a leatherback sea turtle is just over 9 kilometers an hour, which is about, a jog for you and I. More often, they're swimming a lot slower, about 2.5 kilometers an hour, which is slower than most of us walk, but they are persistent and they move long distances. So these animals are traveling really, really far distances. We know that they do show up on the coast of BC, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment. But of course, this is not where they are being born. This is not where their nests are. And in fact, most leatherback sea turtles, as you would guess, like most sea turtles, nest in those nice, warm, tropical places. And of course, during nesting season, it's only the females that come ashore. Usually she's only going to nest every 2 to 3 years, and she heads back to the beaches or near the beaches where she herself was a hatchling as well. And so in that nesting period, they may lay 6 or 7 nests at a time. And those eggs, which are about the size of a tennis ball, to give you a bit of a picture, they will stay in that nest for about 60 to 70 days before hatching and then heading directly out to sea. And if you're a male leatherback sea turtle, you're never going to come back to land again. You're always, always, always going to be on the water. Yeah. So I see a question here that says, why do they travel such far distances? And we are going to get there, Coda. I'm going to tell you that in 1 second. So they're being born in these nice tropical beaches. And for a long time, we knew that we had these tropical beaches where leatherback sea turtles nested on our side of the Pacific. In fact, hopefully you guys can see my cursor here. There's leatherback sea turtle beaches in Mexico, in Central America as well. And we thought probably the leatherback sea turtles from these beaches are coming up to our coast here in Canada and California and Oregon and Washington. But it actually turned out not to be true. Those leatherback sea turtles from Mexico and Central America actually head south towards South America. And the ones that we get on our coast here from Western United States up into Canada, into BC here, are actually coming all the way from the exact opposite side of the Pacific. They're coming from places like Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, and they travel that huge distance all the way across. And there's been some really neat work done by scientists tagging these animals and looking at which beaches, turtles from which beaches go where. And a lot of the turtles that come to us here in Canada and Washington, where my cursor is right now, actually come from a couple of beaches in Indonesia only. And they're making those 20,000 kilometer, 4 or 5 times across Canada journeys across the Pacific. But as Coda just asked, why? Why would they do this? Well, you have to be motivated in order to travel that far. And I don't know about you guys, but motivation for me is often in the form of a treat, my favorite food. And that's exactly the case for leatherback sea turtles. What do they like to eat? They like to eat jellies, jellyfish. Maybe not as delicious as the gummy jellies that we're used to, but for them, this is what motivates them. They eat all sorts of different types of jellyfish, as well as some other gelatinous plankton like salps. And they need to go somewhere that has a huge amount of these jellies. And you know where has a lot of jellies? Really cold, nutrient-rich waters. Waters like we find off California, Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia. Cold water with lots of upwellings, has lots of nutrients, has lots of jellyfish. And so these animals travel all the way across the Pacific to feast on our jellyfish bounty. And scientists in the Atlantic, where a lot of the leatherback research has happened, know that leatherbacks eat an enormous amount. In fact, an average day, they would eat 330 kilograms of jellies, which is approximately like eating the weight, oh, let's see if I can make this go, weight of a muskox in a day. That's how big, 330 kilos is a muskox. And on really hungry days, they can eat up to 840 kilos, which is about eating the weight of a giraffe. So these are turtles that need a lot of jellyfish. And again, cold nutrient waters like we find off Western North America is full of these jellies, and they need a lot of them. I hope that answers your question, Coda. Now, if you're going to eat jellyfish, you need some special adaptations. So these guys do have this really, really strong beak to grab those jellies, almost like a parrot or a bird beak. But when they grab the jellies, they're also taking in a lot of water, a lot of salt water. And just like you and I don't want to drink salt water, they don't want to drink a huge amount either. And so they've got these crazy mouths and esophaguses, throats, that allow them to hold on to the jellies while spitting out the salt water. So what you're seeing on the left here is the mouth of a leatherback sea turtle, and it's got all these kind of fleshy spikes. And these fleshy spikes actually go all the way down their throat. And what you're seeing on the other side, looks a little gruesome, but kind of cool, is the esophagus of a leatherback sea turtle. And basically those spikes point down, so the jellyfish, as they're swallowing it, kind of get caught, can't go back up, but the leatherback can spit out some of that salt water or extrude some of that salt water while keeping the jellyfish kind of in place with those spikes so it can get down to their stomach there. Now, probably the other thing you might be asking is that these animals are probably going to be cold if they're coming from somewhere like Indonesia, where it's hot and the waters are warm. How do they survive in our cold waters? And you would be right to be worried about sea turtles normally, because other species of sea turtles, like green sea turtles and olive ridleys, that sometimes accidentally show up in BC, do experience cold shock when they get into our waters. And that's what you're seeing in this picture here, is one of the patients at our rescue center at Oceanwise that was a cold shocked sea turtle found off the coast here, a little green sea turtle. And this animal, these animals, because they are endothermic, because they don't make all their own heat, when they get in really cold waters, they essentially go into hypothermia and shut down, and they have to be gradually warmed up and then sent down to somewhere like California where they can be released again. But leatherbacks are different. They can handle cold waters. And they've got these great adaptations that allow them to survive in cold waters. Delicious jellyfish smorgasbord. Now, one of the ways that they can survive in cold waters is because they are, this is kind of going to be your cool science word for the day, gigantotherms. So essentially that means big animals make more heat. The bigger you are, the more heat you make. And so they have really large body size, which helps them hold that heat in. And they've also kind of got this tube, almost cylinder type shape, which means there's not as much surface area of their body touching the water. There's more mass inside that's able to stay warm. They also have a nice thick layer of fat on them. They have something called countercurrent circulation, which means cold blood coming from their flippers passes by the warm blood heading to the flippers, and they pass that heat off. So the heat's not being lost to the water, it's staying in the inside. And they also just keep swimming. They're kind of like Dory, if you've watched Finding Nemo. They just keep swimming. They're always moving, so their muscles are always creating that heat. So even though they're not mammals like us, they don't make their own heat, they do have these sort of specialized adaptations that allow them to keep their body temperature a lot warmer than the surrounding waters, which means that they do just fine when they're in cold waters. They can keep their bodies sometimes 10 or 15 degrees warmer than the waters around them. So that's pretty cool. Now, so we've been talking about, okay, we've got leatherbacks in BC. They're really neat animals. They come all the way from the other side of the Pacific. So how are we understanding them on our coast, or how do we even know that they're here? Well, we didn't discover this with the Sightings Network. This is not something that's brand new in the last 20 years of citizen science. The first sea turtle actually was sort of officially recorded, though I'm sure a lot of our Indigenous nations about leatherback sea turtles. But the first one sort of in written record on the BC coast was seen and killed, unfortunately, in Nootka Sound on the west coast of Vancouver Island in the 1930s. And that's the picture you're seeing here from the BC archive of that sort of record of a leatherback sea turtle in Nootka Sound. They brought it into the cannery there. Everybody looked at it, and you can see it's pretty huge. They must have been pretty blown away to see it themselves. Now, since then, since 1931, of course, we've been using this idea of collecting data on leatherback sea turtles through citizen science. And so far, we have 162 sightings in British Columbia recorded in our Sightings Network database. And here's just a picture of a few of them there. So you can see that these animals often, when people do spot them, they don't get a picture. So these are very lucky photos. But you just see the head and a little bit of the carapace like we were talking about. Unfortunately, there have been some animals, deceased animals found. This one in 2012 off Cape St. James was a dead leatherback sea turtle. But all of these sightings are really important for us learning more about when and where leatherbacks come to on our coast. And when we look at this, when we map out where people have spotted them, where our citizen scientists have reported them from, we can see that a couple areas seem to be the hotspot. The biggest one here is off the west coast of Vancouver Island. So most of our sightings, as you can see me running the cursor up and down here, are off the west coast of Vancouver Island. This is a great spot. Another spot that seems to be kind of a mini hotspot is also around Haida Gwaii. And again, remember, these turtles are looking for these nice upwellings of nutrient-rich water. So as the water's coming off the continental shelf, it's coming up, it's making a lot of those upwellings, lots of jellyfish there. So these would be areas where we would see leatherback sea turtles taking advantage of that food source. We do not get a lot of reports of them in inside waters. This does not appear to be an area that they venture much into. Just a few scattered sightings. Some of them are sort of probable, maybe that's what it was. Most of our sightings, though, people feel very confident or had photos that allow us to confirm that those were leatherback sea turtles. Now, not only can we look at where they spend time on the coast using sort of this citizen science data, but we can also look at when they use our coast as well. And so if we kind of look at a little histogram of when leatherback sea turtles are seen on our coast, we can see the summertime is really, really important. And I bet you guys know, if you're someone who spends time on the coast, is that that's when we also get our big jellyfish blooms as well, right? So that makes sense. It really corresponds. Most jellies in the summertime, and that's also when most of our leatherback sea turtles are reported, usually between July and the end of September as well. So most of these sightings are coming from citizen scientists. Some of them do come from researchers, and we sort of amalgamate those all together, but most of them are coming from these citizen scientists who participate as observers for the Sightings Network. And again, I think that that's really cool that we know so little about these rare animals on our coast, and that everyday people who spend time on the water are the ones that are teaching us when and where they spend time. Now, we noticed that there was one type of person on the water who seemed to see the most leatherback sea turtles. And I bet you guys can guess who that is. It was the fishermen. So we did something a couple of years ago where we wanted to know more. And so we just thought we would ask. Right? It's not rocket science at all. So what we did is we got a bunch of information from commercial fishing licenses, and we just sent a questionnaire to them, some by mail, some by email. It was kind of old school. And we had a bunch of those questionnaires returned to us by those fishermen, telling us about what they had seen. Some of them had never seen sea turtles, and that's important. They told us how long they'd been on the water and where they fished, and they'd never seen them, and that's important data as well. But some of them had seen sea turtles, and in fact, we got 26 new sightings never recorded before through those questionnaires. And my colleague and I, who I did this with, used to call this Sea Turtle Christmas. We get so excited when we get another questionnaire in the mail. It felt like getting Christmas cards of what is it going to say and did they see a sea turtle, and it helped us add a bunch more data to a very small data set but important data set, and it was a good lesson, I think, in in science for me and for my colleagues, is that if you want to know, go to the people who are on the water and ask them, because they often have a lot to share with us. So one of the reasons why it's so important for us to learn about leatherback sea turtles in BC, even though they're rare, is because the leatherbacks that we get off our coast here are critically endangered. Critically endangered. In fact, over the last 20, 30 years, this population has declined by over 90%. These turtles are disappearing out of our oceans here. There's a couple different reasons for this. There's a lot of threats on the nesting beaches. Things like direct kill or taking of eggs for food has been a big impact. Also things like predation of nests by domesticated animals like pigs or dogs has been a big issue. Habitat loss of those nesting beaches has also been an issue. Development on those nesting beaches, often by things like tourism, nice fancy hotels on a beach, unfortunately can impact these animals, either by taking that habitat away or altering it. In fact, lights from things like hotels confuse hatchlings, and they often travel the wrong way when they emerge out of that nest. Instead of going to the water, they come towards the light inland as well. That's not to say that the only reason these animals are endangered, though, is because of nesting beaches. They do have a lot of threats while they're out in the ocean, including off the coast of British Columbia here. And a couple of those things include the prevalence of plastic in all the world's oceans. We were just talking about how leatherback sea turtles love to eat jellies. Jellyfish, they're delicious. Unfortunately, when you're an ancient type of sea turtle, you cannot tell a plastic bag apart from a jellyfish. They look so similar when they're floating in the water, and they consume that plastic. And if they consume enough of it, it can impact in their stomach and cause them to not be able to feed properly and therefore not survive. So plastics is a big issue for them. Scientists have seen that over 30 to 40% of dead leatherback sea turtles that are sort of necropsied or investigated have it consumed plastic in their lives or have plastic in their digestive system. Bycatch in fisheries as well. This picture down here is actually from BC in the 80s, disentangling a leatherback from a fishing net. This animal was released, which is great, but we know that across the world's ocean, lots of fisheries that potentially could catch leatherback sea turtles unintentionally. And things like strikes as well. As our oceans become busier and busier and we have more and more shipping traffic happening, there's more and more chance that they could get hit. Leatherbacks are hard to see. They're slow, they can't get out of the way, and so ship strikes could also be something impacting them as well. So we know leatherback sea turtles are in major trouble. And so one of the reasons we want to learn about them is because we want to know where they spend time, when they spend time on our coast, so we can better protect those areas and those times from some of these threats we just talked about. And so our citizen science data allows us to look at sort of hot spots for leatherback sea turtles so that we can take that to ocean managers and take that to different industries to say, we need to think about leatherback sea turtles in these areas. And there's some very cool work being done by my colleagues at Fisheries and Oceans Canada to be able to better understand that. If we know where most of the leatherback sea turtles occur, we can also look at what types of threats might be the biggest impact to them while they're visiting our coast here. So this is an example of taking a bunch of our sightings and overlaying it with different types of fisheries that might have bycatch of sea turtles. And we can look at areas where there's a high degree of that overlap to be able to say, okay, this is an area where we either need to talk to fishermen, or we need to put in some sort of mitigation device, or we need to stagger the timing to make sure that things like bycatch of leatherback sea turtles are not going to be an issue, and these fisheries are not going to accidentally catch one of these rare endangered turtles while it's visiting us here. Now, that's what citizen science can do, but of course there's lots we can do just as people as well. So really easy, probably tips you already know, but 4 main things you can just do to help out our leatherback sea turtles. 1, reduce your plastics. That is huge. Disposable plastics often end up in the ocean, and sometimes we're putting them there on purpose. Things like balloon releases, those balloons always end up in the ocean, whether accidentally or on purpose, and also look a lot like jellyfish. So reducing our plastics, making sure we're not putting them into the environment is a great thing you can do to help out sea turtles around the world, including here in BC. Joining a shoreline cleanup to take some of that plastic out of our marine environments and our coasts, again, going to help out a lot of marine wildlife, including leatherback sea turtles. Choosing ocean-wise certified seafood. So seafood with less bycatch or less chance of bycatch is really important to make sure we are supporting sustainable fisheries and also supporting sustainable tourism. Next time you're going on a tropical vacation and there might be sea turtle nesting beaches nearby, find out what that resort or that hotel does to reduce their impact. There's things that lots of them can do with lighting, with their location that can reduce their impact. So do your research as a sort of responsible tourist as well. And then, of course, you can participate as a citizen scientist. So whether you're going to see a leatherback sea turtle or not, I don't know. I will be honest. I have seen leatherbacks, but not on the coast of BC. But you never know. And you can help as a citizen science learn about a lot of different species on our coast, including all those whales and dolphins and porpoises. So joining the BC Cetacean Sightings Network is as easy as downloading an app on your phone. It's called Whale Report. It's free. You can download it right now, and you can report all sorts of different cetaceans. We also have an online form. We have an email you can see there. We even have a toll-free number, 1-866-I-SAW-1. So if you really want to talk about what you've seen, and we want to talk about any leatherbacks you see, you can give us a call on that line as well. So that's what I wanted to talk to you guys all about today. I've talked for probably far too long, but thanks so much for joining me. And I hope that you not only learned something about leatherbacks, but also the power of citizen science and learning about rare species on our coast. So feel free to ask any questions, and thanks again.
Wow, thank you so much, Caitlin. That was fantastic. I learned so many cool things, and I'm sure our audience did as well. They sent lots of questions, so I can definitely start sharing some of their questions with you.
Sure.
And it was just really exciting. And I think for me, I always love finding out the things that I can personally do to make a difference. And so our audience is going to feel so empowered and motivated to go out and use some of those great suggestions and know that they're helping to protect leatherback sea turtles and lots of other species of animals that live in our oceans.
Sure, yeah.
So one question that we had that came up while you're talking about kind of leatherbacks following those jellies as a delicious meal was, why are kind of nutrient upwellings tied to cold water? You talked a little bit about how they come off the shelf, but Kodo wanted to know more.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I probably didn't explain that very well. So, I think it's two different things that are happening here. So, one, we have a lot of nutrient upwellings as water kind of comes in from the open Pacific and hits the continental shelf, and we get a lot of that mixing, a lot of tidal action. And the cold water in our area actually also holds on to a lot of more oxygen as well. So, those combined oxygen rich cold waters and sort of a lot of these upwellings as we have high tidal action as well as the water moving in off our coast really create a great mix for a lot of marine life, including jellyfish. So hopefully that answers that question there. Mm-hmm.
Very nice. We also had some great questions about, the sea turtles and those incredible mouths and, digestive systems that they have. But how come they're not getting hurt by the jellyfish if jellyfish have such strong stingers?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So, of course, as we all know, jellies can sting. They're cnidarians. They have these little specialized cells called nematocysts that barbs, and when they touch our skin, that's what we're feeling is that sting from jellyfish. And I think that leatherback sea turtles, one, are often feeding on these animals that are not highly venomous, so they're not feeding on these super venomous jellies, and also sort of that specialized throat with those spikes probably also offers some protection and helps sort of pulverize those jellies. But it's a good question. I'm not actually sure exactly how they deal with sort of that nematocyst or that sting, but we do know that they can withstand that for sure. And just like when we get touched by jellyfish here, we know that that sting isn't very bad. They're not really highly damaging jellies that we get off our coast here. But it's a good question, one that I would have to look into a little bit more. I don't have a perfect answer for it.
Well, I'm a little bit jealous that they don't seem to be bothered by those jellyfish stings. I have to say, I've been stung a couple of times and it is not fun. So any of our audience members, people do sometimes eat jellyfish, but it's the cooked top of the jellyfish that doesn't have any of those stingers on it. Do not try to go out and swallow a jellyfish whole unless you are a leatherback sea turtle, because they can definitely that will hurt for a person. For sure. I was really fascinated when you said that leatherback sea turtles can't swim backwards. And
Mhm.
one of our audience members asked, can they swim upside down on their backs?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. And I don't know the answer to that. I have never heard of a leatherback sea turtle swimming upside down on their back. And the way that they're sort of shaped, I would imagine it would not be very easy for them to do because they've kind of got that dome on the top and a little bit flatter on the bottom. And so sort of rolling that would be very, very difficult. But I'm not actually sure. But yeah, leatherback sea turtles can only swim forwards motions. And that means a couple of different sort of interesting things. One, unfortunately, means if they do get tangled in something like debris, marine debris in the water or a fishing net, they can't back themselves out of it, right? They can only move forward, which often means more entanglement. It also has presented some tricky situations for scientists. There were some scientists that were trying to study the life of leatherback sea turtles, and they wanted to bring some into a lab. But what they found is that even if they had a nice big tank for them to study them for a short period of time, they would just ram into the side of the tank. So what they actually had to do is put harnesses on them with a little line so that they could swim around but not actually reach the edge, because once they reached the edge, couldn't back up from it and continue on, which was sort of a clever way for them to, for a short time, observe leatherback sea turtles, young leatherback sea turtles in a lab situation to learn more about them.
Oh, that is very cool. Little harnesses on junior leatherback sea turtles.
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest it, but it goes to show that scientists can be somewhat creative sometimes.
There was also a great question that with, you comparing leatherback sea turtles to the size of a smart car, which is a crazy good comparison. I can barely imagine it. But are they the largest species of sea turtle, or what is the largest species?
Absolutely. Yeah, they are the largest species of sea turtle. Absolutely. By far and away. Absolutely. So they are much bigger than any of the other species of sea turtles that we have in the world. And there's not a lot of different types of sea turtles. There's like 7. So they win the hat of largest. Yeah.
Well, I think you almost answered Matthias's question, but how many species, or are there different species of leatherback sea turtles, or if you see a leatherback, is it always the same species?
Yeah, so there's one species of leatherback sea turtle, but they are different populations. And so we manage them, or we study them and try and protect them as their specific population, because those populations are usually genetically distinct, and have specific areas they use, and specifics. Specific kind of ranges. So we even in the Pacific Ocean have different populations. We have those ones in Central America that travel down to South America. Even in the Southeast Asia and that area where some of the leatherbacks that come to BC are from, there's even a different population in there that actually travels south as well, more towards Australia. So there are distinct populations. They tend to nest at different times, and then move into different areas. But they are all one species, just different populations, subpopulations.
Awesome. Well, we're just about at the end of our time this afternoon, but does anyone have any last minute burning questions? Those were some great questions from our audience today. If you think of a question afterwards, we always welcome them being sent to us. You can find us on Twitter at OceanWiseEDU. And if you send us a question, we can get in touch with Caitlin or ask around, hopefully find the answer for you. So we'll just give people a moment there in the chat if you'd like to ask any last questions.
I see one here that I can maybe answer from Matthias about whether they swim in groups, and that's a really good question. They don't. They are solitary. So if you will be lucky to see one, they're not like killer whales that are living together in these nice tight groups. They are solitary animals. And I just saw one other one, which I think we talked about, but swimming back to the beach that they were born on. And they often come back to the beach, that same beach, or a beach in that general area. Absolutely. So how, scientists do not know. So we don't know how they travel all the way across the ocean and then come back to that same beach, but they do. So there's still some mysteries of leatherback sea turtles that we still have to learn about.
Wonderful. Well, I like the idea of leaving it with some of those mysteries. More people will have to get out there. Oh, we did have one question that just came in, which was, do leatherbacks distinguish between venomous and non-venomous jellyfish? Do you think they know?
It's such a good question, and I feel lacking in my knowledge of their jellyfish preferences. I know what they eat on our coast here, which is moon jellies, lion's manes, fried egg jellies, salps, but I don't actually know. Unfortunately. So I will have to do some more digging into that, about in other parts of the world, especially parts of the world where there's more venomous jellyfish, if they're able to discern. So hopefully we can find that out, and you can leave your email if you want, and we can try and answer that for you.
Excellent. Just one more thing that we'll have to learn more about, and that's always
true.
To have some more questions. One question that I always like to ask all of our guests, just as kind of a closing, was for people that are interested in maybe going into the field of scientific research or starting to become more of a citizen science, do you have any tips or recommendations for, the next generation of scientists?
Yeah. Well, I think as we've been talking about today, being curious, asking questions, like we've got so many good questions today, and really being intrigued is the core thing you need, and always being willing to learn more and admit when you don't know things, like how do they tell the difference between them? I will find that out for you, Coda. Um, but I think it's great to get involved from an early age. So participating in citizen science projects, whether it's a Sightings network or other things like the Christmas bird count, or other projects that might be local to your area. So getting involved in that scientific process early on is a great way. Volunteering is always a really great way to test out different types of science. Um, and uh, and just really, yeah, continuing to learn and to investigate and to join us on things like this to begin to learn more. My background is not as academic as some of our researchers, but really got to be in this position where I get to study whales and dolphins and leatherbacks after university by being interested, by volunteering, by getting to know people in the field that I was interested in, and eventually finding a good fit for me, which is learning about these animals through citizen science. Great.
Awesome. And that's great. Thank you for sharing your email, Coda. If we find out some of those jellyfish answers, we'd love to get back to you. So
I will, for sure.
yeah. So again, we encourage our audience members to stay connected with us, whether it's following us on Twitter or finding us at ocean.org or vanaqua.org, and different updates are happening. You can always check out what live stream events are coming up next by going to ocean.org/learn online, and you'll see our live streams, including our Wet Lab Biologist Talk series and our Ask an Expert series. And we want to give a big thank you to our audience today. We really appreciate your time and your great questions. And if you enjoyed today's program and you've been enjoying live stream programs with us, we would love for you to share the word with others, whether it's posting on social media or telling your friends and family. You can always use hashtag Ask an Expert and tag at oceanwise at edu in your post, and we'd love to see what's getting the message out there. But at this time, you may have heard in the news that Oceanwise and the Vancouver Aquarium is struggling, and so donor support is a huge piece of how we can keep offering programs like this. And so if you are able to, and we understand that some people at this time can't, but every little contribution really makes a big difference. And so you can go to vanaqua.org, and just right on the landing page, there are opportunities for how you can connect with us to make any kind of donation. But again, spreading the word and telling people about how much you enjoyed this program is really important to us too. So thank you so much for joining us. We'll give a big wave and a big thank you to Caitlin for telling us all about citizen science and sea turtles. And we hope to see you again next week. Next Thursday at 12:30 is our next Ask an Expert with Dr. Lance Barrett Leonard, talking all about southern resident killer whales. And tomorrow, even before the weekend, we have our next 11 a.m. Wet Lab Biologist program, all about finding out about the little animals that live under the sand on sandy beaches. So I hope to see you again soon. And thank you, Caitlin, and we'll be signing off.
Thanks so much.